One of the things that winds me up, and I probably could write quite a long list, is when you get on television or on a film and people are getting married and they've written their own vows, and that's lovely. I've got nothing against people writing their own vows, but when they come to say their vows and they will stand there and say, oh, I just really, really love you, and you're just my best friend, and ever since I met you, everything's been wonderful, and you're just so awesome. And I will sit there and say, to my family's annoyance, but that's not a vow. You promised nothing. That's just how you feel. And those of us that have been around for a bit know that love that lasts is not about feelings, is it? In a few years' time, when they're scraping their spoon across the ice cream bowl, or criticising your driving, or facing whatever big challenges that life inevitably brings, you might not be feeling all the feels. And that's when love becomes a practical action thing, doesn't it? I said the traditional vows when I got married, because you had to then in a Church of England church. And I have many times over the years reminded my husband, when we go out maybe for a meal, and he orders a side of chips, and maybe I don't want a side of chips, but maybe I just want 2 or 3 chips, and he says to me, Beth, if you wanted chips, you could have ordered your own chips. I can say to him, on the 10th of October 1998, you vowed to share everything you have with me. And don't feel too sorry for him, because this Christmas, when I caught him eating the chocolate my children had bought me, he said, Beth, you vowed everything you had to share with me. That's how you last 27 years. This chapter we're looking at this morning, if you have been to weddings in church in your life, you may well have heard this. It's one of the most famous chapters in the Bible, all about love. And love is a lovely thing to get to come and talk on this morning. It is the absolute heart of God, isn't it, and his relationship with us. 1 John 4 says God is love. And there's so much about love in the Bible. There's so much about love just in this passage that we could talk about it for weeks and weeks and weeks. So what I'm going to do, because we're looking through this whole long letter, aren't we, that Paul wrote to the Corinthians, I'm going to really talk about it in the context of the rest of this letter, because Paul says, at the end of, he's talking about all these spiritual gifts and all order in the church and how you do things that we've been thinking about the past few months. And then he says, now let me tell you the most excellent way. Or in other translations, it says, now let me tell you an even better way, or the way of life that is best of all. And that's worth knowing, isn't it? That's worth taking seriously. So Paul wasn't really talking about love in the context of marriage, but just in church, in life, in community. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. So I'm going to read the whole chapter because it's not too long. But now, this is at the end of chapter 12. Let me show you a way of life that is best of all. If I could speak all the language of earth and of angels, but didn't love others, I would only be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Prophecy and speaking in unknown languages and special knowledge will become useless, but love will last forever. Now our knowledge is partial and incomplete, and even the gift of prophecy reveals only part of the whole picture. But when the time of perfection comes, these partial things will become useless. When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete, but then I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. So we need to be clear what Paul means when he talks about love. I'm trying to click it on, there we go. The word here used for love, if you've been in church a long time, you'll have heard it, is agape or agape. You can say it how you like, apparently, because it's not really used in any other context apart from in the New Testament to talk about this extraordinary, above and beyond selfless love that God has for people and that Jesus called us to have for each other. It's a unique kind of love that you needed a unique word. And Mark preached in that first talk of the year, in the beginning of January, about what he thinks is a key verse for us as a church this year. Is it there? Yes. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and love your neighbour as yourself. And that was something Jesus said is the greatest commandment. And that was something that would have been well known to people around in Jesus' time. It was a commandment that God gave to the Jews, to the Hebrew people, back when they'd first left slavery, left Egypt, and were trying to set themselves up as a new nation, and he was giving them all the laws and all the processes for this is how you do community well. This is how you have a thriving nation. Love your neighbour as yourself, which sounds really good, doesn't it? If you love yourself. For some of us, loving others like we love ourselves would mean we talk down to them, wouldn't it, all the time? It would mean we say to them, don't go for that job because you're not going to get it. Don't join that serving team at church because someone else will do it better than you. It would mean treating others, it would mean not letting them get enough sleep or taking care of themselves in other ways, wouldn't it? Did you see the way they looked at you? You've probably offended them. They probably don't like you. You've probably done something wrong. And while on the one hand, I really believe the answer to that is to learn to love ourselves well, and I've talked about that before, and to see ourselves as God sees us and Jesus sees us. That's the real answer to that, isn't it? Learning to love ourselves well. But at the same time, when Jesus came along and was here on earth, that last night before he got arrested, when he was pouring out to his disciples and saying, this is the stuff I need to tell you before I go, he said, I'm giving you a new commandment. You've had this one for thousands of years, but I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other as I have loved you. This is after Jesus has just knelt on the ground and washed their smelly desert feet. It's when he's about to go and be arrested and die for them. He's saying, that's how I want you to love each other. That's what real love is. It's very different, isn't it? Agape love is all about what we can give with no thought for what we might get in return. It's not dependent on how worthy of love the person is that we're loving, but our capacity to love. You know, God does not need us, does he? But he chooses us. As a teenager, I used to worry about this command to love everyone. You say, as a Christian, you have to love everyone. I think, how do I love everyone? I'm an introvert. It's hard enough being friends with people. Some people aren't very nice. How do you love everyone? Love to me spoke about trust and intimacy and fellowship, deep friendship. How can we love someone if we don't even know them? But Jesus did demonstrate that. He showed us that loving everyone even in our local church, doesn't mean being close to everyone, being a big part of their life. You know, Jesus had his very best friend, John, didn't he? And then he had Peter and James as well. They made a 4, and then he had 9 more disciples, and then he had some of the women, like Mary and Martha, that he was close to. But when we remember that this kind of agape love is not about what we feel, but what we do, it becomes clearer. So whoever we happen to come across, our neighbour, as that command says, loving our neighbour, which is the people we come across in life, wherever we go at work, you know, on the bus, in the shop, whatever it might be, the people we do activities with, the people at church. We love them how Jesus loved everyone he ever met, which is choosing to act lovingly towards them. We can't go all out for everyone. We can't have deep, meaningful relationships with everyone. We can't do that with everyone, even in church, in a church this size, can we? But whoever it is we're coming across, we can treat them in a loving way and be patient and kind and not be irritable or boastful or rude or demand our own way. We don't actually have to feel like we love them. I was in a training meeting for foster carers a few months ago, and we were talking about managing difficult behaviours. We were talking about spitting. I can tell you, in fostering 17 different children, none of them have ever spat at me. I have had a child in this church spit at me. But we were talking about that, and some of the foster carers were saying, oh, well, you know, firstly, I just tell them that I love them. And this guy, who's been fostering forever and had loads of kids, he put his hand up and said, that's all well and good, but what if you don't love them? And he said, in all my years of fostering, the two I've got now, I'm being honest, they just really annoy me. And the person doing the training is actually an amazing Christian woman, and she answered it really well. But I just sat there and thought, yeah, I get that. But we act as if we love them. We choose to love them by what we do, because love is not really, at the end of the day, just those feelings, is it? So in Corinth, the church has got in a bit of a mess, as we've been hearing about. Paul has written this letter to help steer them back on track. They're struggling with wrong thinking, they're struggling with power struggles, there's immorality. Remember, was it Mark who spoke about the woman who was openly having a relationship with his dad's wife, and no one was saying there was anything wrong with that? Competitiveness, who's right? The services were all getting a bit of a mess as people were talking over each other and not sharing the food and showing off and all that stuff. So Paul is giving them loads of practical instructions on how to sort this out, on how to do life as a community. But then he says, but this is the most important thing. You do it all with love. Rules and instructions and policies and procedures, and we need those. Whenever you get a big group of people together, we need that. But without love, it becomes about control and managing people and managing behavior. Rules can cover up a problem. You know, people will behave themselves out of fear if they think they're going to get in trouble if they don't. But love will heal the problem as it heals the people in the process. Corinth was a society outside the church with a lot of problems. We've heard that, haven't we? There was deep damage there, and love was the answer. In fostering, we learn on repeat. All the training will come back to connection before correction. You can't, when people mess up, they can only learn properly to do better the next time, or maybe the millionth time for some of us, if we feel safe and loved and like someone is there for us and with us, if people are being kind and patient and generous and all those other things. If someone will hope for us and believe there is something better for us. It's not about turning a blind eye to things, but it's choosing to believe when it says love always believes. I don't think it's always necessarily believing in people right then and where they are, but it's believing in God's ability to always transform a situation, to always redeem, transform a life, even while we're being honest and realistic about a situation. Love rejoices with the truth. We need to be honest about things as well. So he talks about prophecy here. I've put up verse 2 as well. If I had the gift of prophecy and understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but I didn't love others, I would be nothing. Again, I think prophecy, speaking God's word, without love, it slips into, again, a bit of manipulation sometimes, doesn't it? Control, fear. Knowledge can become about belittling people and shaming them, or power and status. Jesus, was God. He could access all knowledge, but he knew that people needed time to learn and grow and process and get to understand this whole new way of living that he was talking to them about, to learn that better way. He invested so much more time in loving relationships than he did speaking to loads and loads of people, didn't he? He could have stood up and spoken to the thousands. They listened to him all day. but he spent a lot of time actually building those friendships and loving, those deep loving relationships. We need both. I'm a preacher, I love knowledge, I've trained in teaching, I'm always up for learning new stuff. We do need both, but first, most importantly, comes love if we want people to hear what we've got to teach them. I find that especially with the different children that I care for, I know often what they need to do. I know what the solution is, but they need to be ready to hear it, and they need to trust me for that. So this is the way that we handle the messiness and the confrontations and the disagreements, loving people how Jesus loves us. I think it can be really easy, as for those of us with kind of action people, with a nature like to do stuff, to forget this when we're trying to fix a problem. I spent years as a mum, when my kids were younger, when a problem comes up, my default is, right, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix it? I'll tell them some Bible verses. Let's pray. Let's do this. And I realized the hard way that actually usually what they wanted in that moment was just a hug and just some love. Stop trying to fix me, Mum. I just want you to sit with me. I'm sorry, I would say I'm here now. I've learned that. And then after the comfort, then we can perhaps begin to think about the help. Love is patient. So for church leaders or parents or managers or whatever that might be, how do we deal with wrong thinking or behavior that's not great, or arguments, or people getting offended, or inappropriate spiritual gift usage, or power struggles, or bad attitudes? I've got it here, we are patient and kind. We are not self-seeking, we are not irritable. All these things up there on the screen. We love. We can have a well-run, brilliantly resourced church with loads of activities, social action, an amazing worship band, awesome preachers, nice biscuits. But if people come through those doors, whether it is their first time or their thousandth time, and there is not love here, Paul is saying it is a waste of time. And that means if you follow Jesus, it's not about you just coming and thinking, well, am I being loved, is it? It's about who are you loving and how are you loving them. Don't just feel grumpy about that. Who are you loving? This is for all of us. We are all the church. My son, who works as a pastoral manager for his church, he said, Mum, people new to church want it to be weird. As in, they want it to have something different to the world. And agape, Jesus' love, is something that people can't find anywhere else but apart from with God's people. They can find better music, better talks, listen to podcasts, better coffee somewhere else, but nowhere else can they find people laying down their lives for one another like Jesus calls us to do. Are you loving like that? As Christians, we can find great services online, can't we, if we look? Great music, great talks, all that stuff, but no one on the internet is going to give us a hug, or hand us a tissue, or lay down their lives for us, bring us a meal round when we're ill. So God is love, and there is loads in the Bible that teaches us about God's love and what it is like. 1 John is a really good book if you want to read about God's love. But if we're following Jesus' command to love one another as he loved us, people should be able to say that King's Church is all these things. King's Church is patient and kind and does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out and always protects and never gives up and all these other things. And like I said, that includes all of us. So maybe this week is a good week to think about your relationships. Maybe you have a tricky situation at the moment. Maybe there's someone you're finding it hard to love, and it might be good for you to go and read that list and think, which one of these do I really need to put into practice? I had a situation a few months ago where somebody really upset me. They really offended me. And I've been caring for teenagers for 14 years. I am not easily offended at all, but this was quite a big thing. And it was taking me a while to get over it and to move on from it. I knew that because I kept wanting to talk about it, like feed the outrage, this terrible thing this person had done to me. Rather than let it go. So I was praying about it. God, how do I move on from this? Because this was not good. It was not okay. And I was in a shop, and I happened to see something that I knew this person would really like, and it was like God said to me, buy it for them. And I had a little tantrum and said, if I buy it for them and give them that, they're going to think everything's okay, and it's not okay. And it's like God's just, I bought it, and it sat in my house for days. I don't want to give it to them. I gave it them. It did not make everything all okay, all in one go. But it was a really good step for me, remembering and knowing, Beth, you know this, love is what you do, not how you feel. It's action, it's stepping out. And, you know, it's no one here, by the way, if I've given you a present lately, the person who it is knows who it is. I think Beth gave me a present, but no, it's not, it's no one here. That's how we love each other when it's hard, when what we feel like is, I do not feel like I love you, I feel like you owe me. But I choose to love you with what I do because Jesus loved me first. And the key to this is knowing how much God loves us, isn't it? We've hurt him. We've hurt people he loves. Those of us that have kids, we know how mad do we get when people hurt our children. And we put Jesus on the cross, God's son, but still he loves us. And Rob said this last week, and Shelley said it 2 weeks ago, but I'd already decided I was going to say it, so I'm going to say it again, because I think maybe we just need to hear it again if God's telling all the preachers to say it. But if, as we've been looking at through spiritual gifts, if you're still feeling like, I'm not sure about this, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing, I don't know how to do it, and it feels a bit much and a bit overwhelming, we've all got loads to learn in this area, haven't we? But if that's you, I would say again, just look at this list and just start loving people practically. And in that, you will start seeing what works, your gifts. You'll start seeing the things that, I didn't know I could do that, because actually it's God in you. And other people will tell you, hopefully, as well, because these gifts are to bless each other. And Paul is saying that for the spiritual gifts to be effective, to achieve God's purposes, they have to be motivated by love. I wanted to just look at a couple of these, make some specifically, but I'm not going to have time to do all of them. But we do need to take these things in the wider context of God and his word, don't we, as well, so we don't misinterpret them. It says love never gives up. In some translations, it says it always perseveres. I hope that it's obvious that love never gives up doesn't mean that you need to stick with every relationship forever. I thought if we did that, we'd all be married to our first boyfriend or girlfriend, wouldn't we? I, for one, thank Jesus that didn't happen. If you're dating someone and they are not treating you with love, then love never gives up is probably not applicable unless God has been really, really clearly said, I want you to stick with that person. Yeah? Sometimes we need to move on from a friend. Sometimes that's the best way to love them and ourselves, isn't it? Sometimes we need to do that. It's saying that God is never going to give up on them. We may never give up praying for them, caring for them, wanting the best for them, but it doesn't mean we have to stay, that we are responsible for them and investing in their life and the person that's going to sort all that out. Love is not irritable or easily angered. I was having a conversation with someone very recently who irritated and angered me because they were being very critical and judgmental about someone I love very much. And there were some things I could challenge them in the conversation, but others it wasn't really obvious, but it was afterwards that I thought what really hurt me was it revealed their inner feelings about this person, if that makes sense. From what they were saying, I thought, that's not true. You're seeing this person in a twisted way and not a true way. And I was lying awake at night, churning it over, as you do, thinking of all the things I could have said at the time in a gracious, loving manner. And again, I said, God, how do I respond to this? Because they said loads of stuff that, again, it wasn't okay. It just wasn't good, and I don't think it was true. And love is patient and kind and all of that, but I feel outraged on behalf of this person that I love. And God reminded me in that moment that our battle is not against flesh and blood. It says in Ephesians, Paul said that, it's not against people. And he said, Beth, you're angry because it is lies. But they believe these lies because God's enemy, the devil, is the father of lies, and he lies all the time. And he's lied to them about this person, and they've chosen to believe it. And it was like I could see in my mind this person who was saying this stuff that wasn't good, like a little demon behind them, like throwing the mud, or the arrows, the Bible says, shooting them out. And I thought, well, my response is to lift up my shield of faith to that. And I'm not going to be angry at this person. We've all believed lies, haven't we, in our life, about people, about situations, about whatever. And I was very able in that moment to forgive this person. What I actually did, that was a Saturday night. I walked my dog Sunday morning before church, and I spent the walk through the fields near Calverton just speaking out the truth about this person that I love and saying, actually, this is what God says about this person. This is what is true. And holding up my shield and standing against the lies that people had said. That was really helpful for me in feeling irritable and angered. And I'm coming to a finish now, but I know I've shared this story with some of you lots of times, but some of you won't have heard it at all. And I just felt it was relevant in talking about love. But back in October 2022, as foster carers, we had a call about 4 children who had been at the police station all day. They had nowhere to go that night. We only ever fostered 1 child at a time. George especially was really strict about that because we didn't have space, we didn't have time. We only do 1 at a time. And they'd said, could you maybe take 1 or 2? And we just felt like we loved them, even though we'd never met them. And the only way I can think of it is the times when I was pregnant, and I never knew if I was having a boy or a girl when I was pregnant, and but I just loved them already. And that's how we felt. So we said, we'll have all 4, blow-up beds. It wasn't ideal, and they came, and they were with us for 4 days, and we just loved them so much. And that's God's agape love, isn't it? It doesn't depend on whether people are lovely or lovable. I'm not saying they weren't, but I'm just, it was before we'd even seen them that we loved them. Love at first sight. I write books about love. Love at first sight. As a scientist, I'm like, well, that's impossible. Not with God, it's not. Because it's not dependent on the person that we're loving. So because we didn't have space for 4 children, we said, can we some stay with us? And social services said no. Moved them all on, and the younger 2 went to a foster carer, the older 2 went to a residential home. So we went and got a loft conversion booked. George went to his boss and said, I'm leaving or I'm going part-time, you choose. And we spent 3 months saying to social workers who kept asking us to have other teenagers, but what about those 2? We love them. And in the end, our social worker thought, they're not going to stop going on about this. We need them to have some kids. So she went and spoke to the children's new social worker who'd never met us, didn't know that they'd got a new one. And she said, we can have a conversation, but before I say anything to these kids, because we just kept saying, will you just go and ask them? Will you just go and ask them if they want to come back? She said, we need to have a meeting. So we had a Teams meeting, and one of the really tough things about being in foster care is your file. And everything you do, good or bad, usually it's the bad stuff they write down goes on this file. We fostered a 14-year-old girl, and on her file it said she couldn't tie her shoelaces. And every professional that came to our house said, oh, right, we see you can't tie your shoelaces. And this girl would be so upset because she had to tell everybody over and over again, I can tie my shoelaces. Once I couldn't. It's in the file, though. You can't tie your shoelaces. Whatever in the file is truth. So the social worker said, I need to tell you what's in the file before you decide whether you want these children to come to you or not. So we had this meeting, and they sat down, and they read down everything. It was the boy, the 16-year-old lad, that was in his file, everything he'd ever done that wasn't great. They sat and read it all out to us. And they said, what do you think? And all I could say was, there is nothing you could have said that would have changed my mind. I know this boy, and I loved him like a son. I'd known him for 4 days, and he'll tell you he slept through most of those 4 days. But it was like God had given me his love that was able to see beyond some of the stuff he'd done because of the situation that he was in. The agape love that is not actually dependent on who you are, but on God's love that he gives us that we can then give away. And from the day, 3 years ago on Friday, they walked back through our door, that file was nonsense and rubbish. He walked through our door, decided we were his parents, and he was our son, and that was that. Love keeps no record of wrongs. It's a fresh start, it's a new start. I will say, though, that loving people doesn't mean always trusting them. When it says love always trusts, again, it's talking about God. You know, I loved my kids when they were tiny. I wasn't leaving them in a room with my boys with a chainsaw, yeah, or a bowl of sweets that they weren't allowed to have. That's silly, isn't it? Love also means I know what responsibilities you can handle in life, and I will be wise about that, because love always protects as well. So it doesn't mean giving them responsibility they can't handle. I believe, like I've said, love always trusts means it always trusts in God's ability to redeem, to see the best in people, that no one is too lost and no one is too broken. It means sometimes putting safeguarding in place, doesn't it, to protect them and us and everybody. And Paul is really clear in his letters about boundaries and being safe. But God does not see us as the sum of our mistakes, but as treasured children. And since fostering and being a special guardian, I've known this love of God in a whole new way. I know it's God loving me because it's not logical by the world's terms. Children who I have loved in the past who can give me very little. What they do give me sometimes is just stress and sleepless nights and we've loved and cared for practically children who can never say I love you back. They can't even say thank you. But that's how God loves us, isn't it? In Romans 5 it says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And this is how we're called to love each other in this way. The most excellent way. The only way that works, that without it nothing matters and nothing counts. And Paul is reminding the Corinthians, as I think God would remind us, this is the only way that we build functional communities and healthy churches and strong families and lasting marriages and genuine friendships, is to try to aim, because we're never going to manage this all the time, are we? That's why we have grace. But it's to try to aim to love people this way as Jesus first loved us.